I really enjoyed listening to the speakers this morning, as I'm sure you did as well. And some of the takeaways for me, one of them was Senator King's comment on there may not be a silver bullet, but there is a silver shotgun. In other words, there are many, many ways to solve this problem, and we're going to need all of them. And I appreciated Rep. Higgins' comment about telehealth and the Island Institute's comment about bringing back our young people. Both of those are comments I hear from Next Century Cities on a regular basis about the importance of having internet in their communities. And I loved Ellen's advice about building a network of champions at the city level. At Next Century Cities, we really believe in local leadership and the strength and power of local leadership. So one of the most common questions I get as Executive Director of Next Century Cities is, do you know anybody at Google? And could you get Google to come to my community? So today I'm going to pass this question on to someone who knows the answer better than anyone else. Jill Szuchmacher began working at Google in 2006 and brings over 20 years of experience working at the intersection of technology and media in her current role as Director of Expansion of Google Fiber. Please join me in welcoming Jill Szuchmacher. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. It's been great to be here this morning. I have not actually, even though I'm based in New York, I have not spent that much time with Google Fiber in New England, as I'm sure many of you know. So it's nice to be here and hear a lot more about what folks are doing and thinking about here in Maine. So as Deb mentioned, my name is Jill Szuchmacher, and I head up expansion for Google Fiber. So that means my team works with cities, utilities, and other key partners in order to bring Google Fiber to a growing list of cities in the US. So given the focus of today, I'll focus my comments this morning specifically on what cities can do, not just for Google Fiber, but more generally, to encourage high-speed internet deployment. I'll share a little bit about the history of Google Fiber itself, because that might be an interesting story. And then I'll share a bit about our experiences and some best practices from working with some of our existing fiber cities that hopefully will leave you with a few things to think about. So first, the history of Google Fiber. So 5 years ago, Google put out an RFI to see if there were any US cities that would be interested in working with us to build a local gigabit network. We expected maybe 8, maybe 10 submissions, and weren't really sure at all what the proposals would look like. And we were overwhelmed and surprised and delighted when we received well over 1,000 proposals from cities who were very excited and urged us to choose them to bring a gig to. Cities were incredibly eager to work with us. Topeka, Kansas, as some of you might recall, actually changed its name to Google Kansas for a day, which was a little overwhelming. And many cities organized citywide sort of rallies and produced amazingly creative pitch videos that were really amazing to see. So one of the things that we learned through our process of, we chose Kansas City, and then we worked with Austin, Texas, as our second fiber city. And one of the things we learned was that demand was really only one part of the puzzle when it comes to building these types of networks. And I'm sure many of you folks who work actually in city government will, my next comments will probably resonate with you. Because one of the things we learned was how very hard it is actually to build or deploy fresh citywide infrastructure. So in Kansas City and Austin, we made announcements of our intentions first, and then began the planning work, which really both started a clock in the minds of residents and the mind of the cities in terms of the expectations of when would fiber come and how long would this take. And we hadn't even begun to understand the permitting processes, what construction requirements would be, understanding the right-of-way, pole access, all the stuff that goes into building a large-scale network before you deploy and start construction of thousands and thousands of miles of fiber. So we knew there had to be a better way and a more efficient way. So that's why last year we published a Google Fiber checklist to work with cities on an upfront joint planning process. The checklist is a simple concept, and maybe some of you have downloaded and read it. Since citywide fiber construction is such a big project, the checklist provides an actionable plan to help cities and providers, not just us, get ready ahead of time. So it's a collection of best practices recommended by the Fiber to the Home Council, GIG-U, U.S. Conference of Mayors, and other industry experts, some of whom are probably in the room today. And the goal is really to have a tool for any city that's preparing for any fiber builder. It's really not specific to Google Fiber. And now that we've had a chance to work through the checklist with a number of cities, there's a few best practices that I'd like to share this morning. First, have a strong vision for what abundant high-speed internet can do for your community, both as it relates to speed and as it relates to access. As a provider, we want to know that if we invest in building a network in your city, your residents and businesses will want to use it. It seems simple, but is actually something that is important to think about. Your mayor and your city leadership team should be able to pitch the local need for speed to potential providers. And again, this is not specific to Google Fiber at all. There's many, many solutions to this question. And that network provider might be actually a municipal solution. It doesn't necessarily have to be a commercial provider like us. It's also really important to understand the specific digital divide issues in your community and have a plan to address that. Every city is different. In Provo, for example, it's mostly seniors who are not connected, and I imagine that would be a similar situation here in Maine. The challenge looks different in Nashville and San Antonio and Charlotte and each of the other cities we're working in. So one best practice that we've seen was in the city of Raleigh, where they did a proactive study on the digital divide long before we started our engagement with them, looking at what the barriers were in Raleigh for their residents. Was it literacy? Was it relevance? Was it affordability? And then took those results and implemented what they call digital connectors, which is actually a leadership development program for young people ages 14 to 21 that they set up to better connect their community. Leadership in Raleigh had done that work before we started our conversation about bringing fiber, and also AT&T is bringing fiber there, and also Frontier is bringing fiber to some parts of the Triangle. And thus today, Raleigh and some of the other cities in the Triangle are in a great place to partner with us and other providers to ensure that their entire community is served. The second learning I'd like to share is the need to prepare your city organizationally. This is something my team cares deeply about. We work very closely with cities. These are large-scale infrastructure projects. In our experience, cities can best prepare for and manage these projects by creating a cross-functional working group that's ready to act as dedicated liaisons with network providers. For example, in Nashville, 12 departments were represented in every meeting. Public Works, Planning, Fire, GIS, Police, everyone. The goal was to have the team that was ultimately going to process and approve the permits all in the same room to make sure that the processes could scale for a large-scale network deployment. The third learning I'd like to share is really a key pillar of our checklist, which is your city should do everything it can to know what resources you have and then store them in a shareable format. We've had cities who didn't even know or couldn't identify where their public right-of-way was. Did not have any digital assets so that all the maps and as-built and so on were on paper. These types of investments are actually really important for any network provider coming in, needs to know where to put stuff in the right-of-way. So that's really critical. And last but not least, and this is hopefully actionable for all of you, which is that cities can explore ways to play an active role in facilitating faster, less disruptive construction. And there are a couple suggestions that we have here. One is dig once. This has been brought up earlier this morning. I'm sure it will continue in the afternoon. If you're doing road improvement work, think about laying fiber or underground conduit while the streets are already open. Ask new developers to install fiber in their buildings right next to copper and plumbing. Require communications providers to install oversized conduit banks as they build or repair their networks. And then implement one-touch make-ready. So you can also consider requiring one-touch relocations along utility poles. This is really wonky, so the folks in the room who work in right-of-way, this will make sense. Folks who do other types of policy, maybe none of this will make sense. But often when a new provider is building, there's a lot of work that has to be done on a utility pole, and it could take months of sequential work, multiple visits to a pole, lots of traffic disruption, all to facilitate this, the construction of new fiber on poles. So cities can take action here to modernize right-of-way ordinances to require that all make-ready moves be made at one time with a pre-approved contractor. So hopefully these are some helpful steps to becoming more fiber-friendly and are good ways to start conversations with any provider, including starting a conversation to think about if this might be a solution for folks and cities to pursue on their own. So thank you so much. Hope this was helpful, and enjoy the rest of the day. Take care.